Alright, let's talk about something that sparks endless debates across dinner tables, social media, and every World Cup season. Why do Americans call it soccer, while the rest of the world insists it's football? Seriously, who's right? And why did this divide even happen? I'll be honest, when I first heard someone call it soccer, I thought, wait, what? Where I'm from, it's football. You know, you kick the ball with your foot. The logic seems simple, but then I came to America and realized they already have a football, except it's a game where you barely use your foot. Confusing, right? Here's the surprising part. The word soccer isn't even American. In fact, it came from England. So yeah, you can't fully blame the US for this one. Today we're diving into the fascinating, honestly kind of funny history of why Americans decided to stick with soccer, while the rest of the world shook their heads and said, no, it's football. Before we get started, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, is it soccer or football where you're from? I want to know how you see it. Alright, let's settle this once and for all. Let's rewind to 19th century England, where the beautiful game as we know it was just starting to take shape. Back then, they didn't just have one kind of football, they had several. There was rugby football, which allowed you to carry the ball, and association football, which focused on using your feet. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The British, being lovers of nicknames, started shortening association football to a-soccer. Then, because it's not catchy enough, they had a little flair and turned it into soccer. Yep, soccer is British slang. Crazy, right? For a while, this wasn't controversial. People in England used both terms, soccer and football, interchangeably. It wasn't just a fun nickname, like calling rugby football rugger, but as the game grew in popularity worldwide, the name football stuck for most of the world, while soccer eventually became, well, kind of uncool in England. So how did this world cross the Atlantic? British immigrants brought back the game with the nickname to the US in the late 1800s, and for a while it thrived. But here's the thing, Americans were also playing another sport called football, you know, the one with helmets, tackles, and touchdowns. But let's face it, calling two different sports the same name wasn't going to work. Americans kept soccer to avoid confusion, and honestly, it made sense. After all, the world was already in use, and Americans were carving out their own unique culture, including in sports. Meanwhile, back in England, soccer started to fall out of favor. By mid-20th century, they dropped it completely, leaving America as one of the few places still using this term. In other words, soccer isn't just some random Americanism, it's a piece of history that got stuck here, like tea on ice, or adding peanut butter to everything. Now, while America was happily calling it soccer, the rest of the world was doubling down on football. And honestly, it makes sense. What do you do in the game? You kick a ball with your foot. Case closed, right? But here's where things get interesting. In countries where football, or soccer, became a way of life, the term football took on a much deeper meaning. It wasn't just a name, it became a part of culture. In places like Brazil, England, or Spain, football is practically a religion. It's just not a game, it's a passion, a lifestyle, a reason to celebrate or cry. Meanwhile, in America, soccer was still seen as that other sport you play as a kid before graduating to football, baseball, or basketball. This cultural divide also shaped the language. While most of the world embraced football, Americans were busy creating their own sports identity. And let's be honest, Americans like to do things differently. We measure miles, not kilometers. We use Fahrenheit instead of Celsius. And oh yeah, the imperial system. Don't even get me started. Actually, I already did a whole video on why America sticks with the imperial system while the rest of the world uses metric. If you're curious about that, check out the link in the description or somewhere on the screen, here or here. Soccer. It just became another example of that American individuality or stubbornness, depending on how you look at it. But here's the fun twist. England, the very country that gave us the world soccer, now looks down on it. Too many Brits today calling it soccer feels like an insult, as if you're downgrading the sport somehow. It became a sort of linguistic divide. If you say soccer, you're clearly American, or maybe Australian or Canadian, because they use it too. But if you say football, you're part of the global club that sees the sport as one of the only football. So, why the disagreement? It's not just about the name, it's about identity, culture, and tradition. To the rest of the world, it's football because that's what it's always been. In America, it's soccer because, well, it has to be something else. And here we are, arguing about it over Twitter at every World Cup. So here's the thing, while the rest of the world was treating soccer like a religion, America didn't exactly roll out the red carpet. For a long time, soccer was seen as sports for kid, immigrant, or that one neighbor who just came back from studying abroad. It wasn't mainstream, and it definitely wasn't a big moneymaker comparing to football, basketball, or baseball. But why? Part of the reason lies in timing. When soccer was growing globally in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, America was already hooked on its homegrown sport. Baseball was a national pastime, basketball had just been invented, and football, American football, was turning into a cultural phenomenon. There just wasn't room for another major sport. And then there's the style of play. Soccer, with its flowing, continuous action and low scores, didn't fit the American appetite for high-scoring games with big, dramatic moments. Americans like touchdowns, home runs, and slam dunks, those explosive, game-changing plays. Soccer, it felt slow. And let's not forget the lack of commercial breaks, which didn't exactly thrill advertisers. But things started to shift in the late 20th century. The 1994 FIFA World Cup, hosted in the US, was a turning point. It showed Americans that soccer could be a spectacle, and it left behind Major League Soccer, or MLS, as its legacy. And while MLS didn't explode overnight, it slowly built a foundation for the sports in the US. Today, soccer is finally earning its spot in American culture. Kids grew up playing it. International stars like Messi and Ronaldo draw massive crowds, and events like the Women's World Cup have turned the US into a global soccer powerhouse. And it shows like Ted Lasso, because let's face it, we all love Ted, and soccer is no longer just the European thing. It's an American thing too. But make no mistake, it's still climbing. It's not on the level of American football or basketball yet, but it's getting there. And who knows, maybe one day Americans will start calling it football too, or maybe not. But let me tell you about the first time I heard the word soccer. I was new to US and someone casually asked, "Hey, do you like soccer?" I just froze for a second. Wait, what? Do I like what? Oh, football. Yeah, I love football. But then they started talking about completely different sports. For a moment, I genuinely thought we were in some kind of parallel universe. And then, when I finally realized it meant what I call football, I was even more confused. I mean, why does their football barely involve the foot? And why does the game stop every few seconds? But hey, I didn't want it to be an outsider who complained about everything, so just went with it. I started calling it soccer, but I can't lie, it felt a little weird at first. I'll never forget the one conversation with an American friend when I jokingly said, the rest of the world calls it football, right? They just shrugged and said, yeah, but we're not the rest of the world. And honestly, that sums it up pretty well. What I've learned is that language and sports, for that matter, it's all about perspective. What seems obvious to one person might feel completely backward to someone else. That's part of the fun, isn't it? Soccer, football, call it whatever you want. In the end of the day, we're just fans of the same beautiful game. So why do Americans call it soccer while the rest of the world calls it football? Turns out, it's not just an American quirk. The word actually started in England, crossed the Atlantic, and stuck around because America already had its own version of football. It's a little bit of history, a little bit of practicality, and let's be honest, a lot of American individuality. In the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you call it, soccer, football, the beautiful game. Or, as some people say, messy game. What matters is the passion it inspires, whether you're watching the World Cup, playing with friends, or just arguing about the name. But here's the real question. Why is American football called football when the foot barely gets involved? That's a story for another time. So make sure you subscribe because you don't want to miss it. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and share with your football or soccer friends, and let's keep the conversation going in the comments. Is it soccer or football where you're from? And do you think the US will ever embrace the name football? Let me know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode of Alex in America. Until then, keep playing, keep watching, and keep loving the game, whatever you might call it.